This is the 20th season of Bass Talk Live. BTL is presented by Bass Cat Boats, Strike King Lures, Aftco, Pro Guide Batteries, Spro, Gamakatsu, The Bass Tank, Denali Rods, Beatdown Outdoors, and Sunline.
BTL coming at you.
Good morning and welcome to another exciting edition of BTL Bass Talk Live, where we are going to talk about bass fishing. Recorded show today, kicking off a week. I'm looking at the forecast right now based on when we're recording this. It is a wet, rainy, and potentially snowy day today on Lake Ouachita for the second Bassmaster Open EQ. But I wanted to get a couple shows in the can, and one of those was an angler that's been on the radar of the professional fishing scene. Well, literally for the last couple of years, because legally, I think he's only been able to fish at the top level since you're 18, so 4 years. So, but an angler from my home state, also Illinois, which I'm also very excited about. Obviously, you know, Chad Morgenthaler came from Central Illinois. There's a number of different Illinois anglers comes to mind up by Chicago. Long-time Elite Series angler. Long time ago, he'd have the gold rim glasses. He'd sit on the front. Doc Merkin, he's another Illinois angler. But right now, the Illinois angler that is making waves on the Bass Pro Tour is just coming off of a third place finish on Toledo Bend, 21 years old, and that is none other than Drew Gill. Drew, nice to meet you. First of all, it's not too often I get a first-time BTLer, so excited to get to know you today on BTL. Congratulations on your recent finish, and thanks for jumping on BTL.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate you having me on, and I'm ready to talk fishing.
We are definitely going to talk fishing today. First off, it's crazy to me. You know, it used to be when I first started covering this, and I'm dating myself. I'm almost 40, man. It's hard to believe that because you look at the young guys coming up, and it used to be like, oh, you hear this young guy, and then he'd have a couple good tournaments, and then he'd qualify, and then you'd say, well, let's give him 3 years on the Elite Series or 2 years on the FLW Tour, and if he survives that, then he's an established pro. And it was like a 5 or 6 year process to kind of get to the scene, to get recognition. Dude, there's like a dozen 18 to 23-year-olds right now where you guys just come in, you say, I don't care how old everyone else is, how much experience everyone else is, I'm going to kick butt, and you are squarely one of those anglers right now. So, I mean, like 2 years ago, you were fishing college stuff. Now you're banging it out with DC, Jacob Wheeler, Zach Burge, the guys at the top of the Bass Pro Tour, making hundreds of thousands of dollars. What do you think it is that's allowed you guys in your early 20s to make such an impact at the top level of professional bass fishing so quickly?
I mean, this isn't the case for everybody, but for about half of those anglers at least, one of the biggest factors with coming out and doing so well so fast is college fishing. You know, I was having a conversation with my roommate Cole Breeden last night, who fished for Drury, about this, and we were talking about how, you know, this is both our second year fishing at the invitationals level or above, and on surface level, that's 2 years of fishing. You know, this is the start of second year, but when you look at college fishing and all the places we go and the frequency with which we go to these events, this is my, you know, 4th year of doing this full time, where I fish, you know, over a dozen major tournaments a year. Like, that's, in my opinion, the time on the water afforded by college fishing. And a lot of guys that are my age, affinity for using forward-facing sonar is just a deadly combination for understanding places really, really fast.
Where did you fish collegiately?
So when I was still technically am in college, but when I was fishing college tournaments, I fished for Wabash Valley College, which is a community college in Illinois, for 2 years. And then I finished up my degree, or I am finishing it up, at Campbellsville University in Kentucky.
Okay. What's your degree in?
Business marketing. I mean, it's kind
is that a fishing degree? Like, you're looking at that as something to go hand in hand with your future?
Yeah, man, that was my intention when I went into college, was to get something that would kind of lead me into the industry. But I mean, I'm going to be perfectly honest. Business marketing is a bit of a cop-out degree. I would say there's probably about 80% of the entire college fishing field is business emphasis and marketing.
As a communications degree, I feel like you have to throw communications in there as well.
Yeah. Yeah,
but I mean, there has to be definitely some stuff that you learn from that. I know. Well, granted, I do a podcast, so communications ended up actually being fairly helpful. But there has to be some stuff from college that you can apply. I mean, you have a pretty deep sponsor portfolio for being a 21-year-old.
Yeah, man. I mean, one of the, it's something that, like, the marketing side of it is kind of an intangible. Sometimes you can it's something you can learn and apply and try and study. But ultimately, me, I'm a very social person to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can have the personal relationships part meet the professionalism, if you have both of those, it's really easy to, work with the companies that you work with and all the fans and everybody in a very, very professional manner, when you can have both the ability to be presentable and social at the same time.
So growing up in Mount Carmel, Illinois,
mm-hmm.
and I opened this because there hasn't really been, am I missing someone? Has there been, and I'm not saying you're there yet, and I don't want to put any pressure on you for this, but has there been a superstar that's come out of Illinois?
Trey.
Like Trey McKinney, who's, well, he's not a superstar yet. He's 18 years old. He has potential as well. But listen, I grew up fishing Illinois, Assumption Bass Club, middle of the state. It's not a hotbed for tournament fishing, and it's not like you're growing up on Gunnersville or Toledo Bend or even down in Florida or the Carolinas or out on the West Coast. Is this something that you've always wanted to do? And then how have you honed your skills in Illinois to be able to take it on a national level so quickly?
Man, I think growing up in a place like Illinois is somewhere that although you see a low frequency of anglers coming from parts of the country that are kind of off the wall or not applicable to the way we fish in lots of southern and eastern impoundments. But when you come from a place like that, either you're destined to really struggle, or if you can drop the habit that you create by growing up fishing in those areas, and now you've learned how to deal with tournaments, deal with fishing pressure on small lakes, deal with tougher fisheries, but you just look at that at the macro level. You don't say micro level, I know that when it's cloudy, I'm going to throw a black jig with purple skirt material in it. Like, if you look at it at a macro level, I've learned how to deal with lots of fishing pressure on tough fisheries. And you take that and you apply that, the general concepts, but understand that the fishing style that you learned around the house really isn't that applicable elsewhere. You get really dangerous in a hurry, because you have the mental skills and stability to deal with difficult, conditions, deal with adversity, but you also have the open mindset, because you're not taking any sort of fishing style and trying to apply it everywhere. You're just going to fishery and trying to fish it for the fishery.
That's answer beyond your years. So Illinois fisheries, are we talking like Shelbyville, Clinton? Like, what kind of fisheries did you, I hate to use the term grow up fishing, but what kind of fisheries have you fished in the past 6-7 years?
Yeah. So the stuff in Illinois that I fish, I mean, for the most part, I fish like Clinton, fish Lake of Egypt, fish.
I love Lake of Egypt. We start Lake of Egypt out every year, and it'd be like, dude, we can catch a limit on Lake of Egypt depending on the slot. I was always pumped to start Lake of Egypt.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Because you can keep this 12 to 14 inches.
Oh, absolutely.
But I fish a lot on Newton Lake as well, which is one that, it's not as big of a lake, but it definitely deserves the hype it gets. It's been on the Bassmaster Lakes ranking most years for the last 10 years. And it's
a lot of pressure.
It's one
on
that
Newton.
really, a lot of pressure. I mean, any given day, there's going to be 50 plus boats on like 7 miles long, and they're smart, but man, that's a place that it kicks out giant bags. I've caught one bag over 30 there, and over the course of the summer, I catch at least half a dozen bags over 25. I mean, it's got big ones. So that, fishing around the house, most of our lakes are pretty tough, but we have a couple Newton, and a couple others that are really, really good. And so you get a good dose of fishing tough fisheries, but also the ones that are really good, you learn how to catch big fish that are pressured, because even the ones that are good, they're small lakes.
Mm-hmm.
And when you learn how to just because when you get the opportunity to fish for a bunch of fish in that 4 or 5 to 6 pound class range, you get a lot better in a massive hurry, because you learn how big fish behave, what they relate to, and what things you got to do to trigger them under different conditions. And ultimately, if you're doing it on a small lake where you're almost always fishing for the same exact populations of fish on the same places, but you're learning how to do it under different times of the year, different conditions, and with different amounts of pressure, it gets you really honed to catching those big fish under the most adverse conditions possible. When we think about it in tournament fishing, we think of Florida, we think of the TVA, places where you've got big fish fisheries, but those big fish aren't very dumb. And that's definitely something that, adapting to fishing pressure, I think, is the most important variable, that when people do get good in a part of the country like where I'm from, they get really good really fast.
Just as far as being comfortable on the water, then I fished collegiately, I fished after, but it takes a number of years to just get comfortable with the travel, with being in the boat by yourself, with learned rough water, with navigating. Were you put in a boat by yourself at a young age to where you were making decisions as a teenager? Is that something that the collegiate fishing really helps you with? But I mean, you're making those decisions on the top level now with not a lot of years of experience, which is impressive to me.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. I mean, I grew up fishing, but I didn't grow up tournament fishing. I think I fished my first tournament when I was like 16. That's when I really got into like competitive tournament fishing. So I didn't have lots of years of experience. Like the first places I went whenever I started fishing, I looking back at it now, I probably picked some pretty poor places and times to try and start, going to bigger lakes. But like I went to Table Rock and Cumberland in the fall. Kentucky Lake's 2 hours from my house, and I really truly started trying to find fish on a lake that's 189 miles long or whatever. And I put myself through Lake St. Clair when I first bought a bass boat and didn't know what I was getting into. And so, I got between, lakes like Kentucky and St. Clair and getting used to running a boat in rough water and going to places like Table Rock and Cumberland in the fall when you got gin clear water, really tough fishing, and really hard to get fish to commit. I mean, even in just a year of getting to experience a couple new places, like me and my dad would pack up and we'd drive and we'd go fish these places for 2 days and turn around and drive back before I had school or he had to go back to teaching. And so I'd get a little snapshot. And then when I started college fishing, college fishing, like, it drops you on places that really, to be perfectly honest, college fishermen probably shouldn't be. I mean, in college, I fished I fished in Florida multiple times. I fished the TVA, almost the entire TVA. I fished multiple lakes in South Carolina, North Carolina. I fished multiple lakes in Missouri, Arkansas, Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
I fished, in Wisconsin. I fished in Michigan. I fished in New York. Like, we got sent to Saginaw Bay as college anglers. We got kids that are out here that have never been in a boat in a tournament without a boat captain, and they're going out on Saginaw Bay in 47 footers. Like, it's when you get into the college fishing thing with the scheduling that they do and the high octane, like, tournament to tournament to tournament you do all year, you're getting thrown to the dogs.
It is. What made you want to jump in that first tournament when you were like 16 years old? You mentioned you'd always fish, but was there one thing that pushed you towards that? Is your family into it? Did your dad tournament fish?
My dad tournament fished when I was very young, but then he for a long time, when I started fishing, we just fun fished. And that's what we did my entire childhood. And then I'm an extremely competitive person. I feel like whenever you become a tournament angler, it's because it's just where the blend of loving bass fishing and being a hyper competitive, play 3 sports a year kind of kid, it's where those combine. And I played sports my entire childhood, and there came a point where I was trying to decide what direction whether I wanted to go full in on like golf or baseball, or whether I wanted to just keep exploring different stuff. And then I bought a bass boat, and that was the big thing. It's like, once I bought a boat, an actual bass boat that I could take to bigger fisheries and go fish on the weekend or whatever, like, that's when I was like, I feel like this is something I want to try and do. And it, fishing professionally wasn't really on the radar at that time. That was something that,
Did you follow it? Like, were you a big fan of the sport, or?
Yeah, so when I was about 17, I'd say, like a year
Okay.
into getting into competitive fishing, that's when I really that's when I started just indulging myself in just about all of the professional bass fishing content I could watch. And I mean,
So
not
2019,
growing up, yeah,
2018, 2019.
2018, 2019. Not growing up watching it my entire childhood, I had a lot to catch myself up on. So I mean, I don't know how many hours I spent watching old FLW and Bassmaster tournaments, but it was thousands of hours.
Do you think a lot? Do you think you learned a lot off of the water watching the YouTube? This is an interesting case study to me because you're a generation that has everything at their fingertips as far as the information that the guys before would be like, yeah, don't show that bait. That's my secret bait for the next 5 years because there was no live. They lie about all this stuff, but like you can get on. And if you want to learn about Lake Okeechobee, there's 150 hours of tournament coverage from Lake Okeechobee.
Yeah.
Like as you started traveling in college to these fisheries, were you applying what you watched and learned on YouTube and on social media and actually seeing success with it on the water to where it reduced your learning curve and it wasn't as intimidating?
I'll say early on, like my freshman year especially, it was a big player for me to get on and do YouTube research, do previous tournament research, to do map study at home, and like do all these things to at least make it easier for me to break it down on the fly once I got there. But as you go along, I feel like those things do tend to play less and less of a role, just because in my tournament success, in my tournament history over the last 2 years, really a lot of the times where I've really like competed to win an event, it's been on something pretty non-traditional. I think of like the Toyota Series Championship at Gunnersville 2 years ago that I finished third in. Like nobody was fishing around the middle of the lake at Gunnersville for single suspended fish. And like Lake of the Ozarks Invitational last year, I was fishing for bedfish on scope, and you follow Oklahoma, I was fishing for them up in the dirt, 3 feet of water on it. And La Crosse was catching them on, doing some stuff there that was really unique related to the current. I mean, the more I learn about this fishing thing, and the more I watch fish behavior, the more I tend to fish kind of non-traditional, because a lot of the traditional things we learned for a long time were kind of based on the best guesses we could make. I mean, really, that's what it was, is we were trying to accumulate enough experience, enough time on the water that, when we were faced with the same set of conditions multiple times, that, we tried to play around with things and figure out how often they worked and how often they didn't. And we were trying to be the best guesser we could be. And now that we have the ability to collect the information at such a rapid rate, it's not about being the best guesser you could be anymore. It's just about purely learning fish behavior. And as soon as you purely learn fish behavior and how they relate to things in relation to their environment, the way that a certain lake sets up, you can find some non-traditional fish really easily on a lot of places.
That's a really deep answer. I'm trying to figure out where I want to go next with this, because we're in the age of technology. Let's dive into the technology, because it's no secret that you rely a lot on exactly what is available for the anglers, just like 99% of the top anglers are. Your MLF profile actually states that you have covered enough water while using a live scope on a trolling motor to travel from Washington, D.C. to San Francisco with miles to spare. Mm-hmm. It seems to me like you are actually taking advantage of your, and I don't want to use the term lack of experience, but the fact that you don't have 20 years of the traditional patterns, Absolutely. What you just talked about, and your advantage is in the fact that you don't have the word should in your category when you go into a tournament. Does that make sense?
Oh,
like
yeah,
what
dude.
The fish should be doing.
The biggest factor in what has allowed me to learn so fast is I haven't learned fish behavior from the fishermen. I've learned fish behavior from the fish. I have watched them in their environment so many hours now and so many days on so many different fisheries that I'm not allowing any sort of old school or traditional dock talk, which a lot of that was right, but a lot of it was wrong too. And I've learned how to approach these fisheries through purely watching the fish behavior. Like the best thing you can do for yourself as an angler is to listen to the fish and not the fisherman. I mean, if you just watch how they relate to things and you spend enough time interacting with them and watching how they relate to their environment, not even casting, like truly just watching them interact with their environment, you learn so many little things so fast.
There are literally hundreds of anglers competing at the BPT Elite Series Open and Toyota Series level that have this technology at the tip of their fingers. But you have back-to-back top fives in Toyota championships. You have a third place finish in your Bass Pro Tour event that you fished. You had a very strong collegiate career using it, and you finished top 10 in the invitationals to qualify for the BPT last year. What do you think it is about you and a couple other guys, with everybody knowing how powerful this technology is, that has allowed you to consistently be better than anyone else and beat 99% of these guys doing it?
Oh man, it's definitely getting harder and harder by the day, just because everybody finds the fish now. Like look at the Open from Okeechobee. Oh my gosh, I've never seen anything like it.
I was right in the middle of it, Drew.
Oh man, and it's unbelievable how often everybody finds everything anymore, especially in big field tournaments like Opens, like Toyotas, like the Invitational I'm about to fish here at Rayburn this week. I mean, they get found so fast anymore, and I think a big part of it is there's two different directions you can go with learning how to utilize forward-facing sonar, and one direction is what I would call like the Dakota, Michael Neal, Jacob Wheeler angle, which is the angle where they're around 1 million fish all the time. They're trying to move a lot, and they're not as focused on bite percentage purely as they are just staying around the biggest population of big fish they can at all times. And my angle is a little bit different, which has served me well, and it's something that I'm starting to try and make an adjustment with, because with the Every Fish Counts format, you have to be around a large population. It just doesn't work without it on certain fisheries. Santee, Eufaula, my approach will be a little bit better than a place like Toledo Bend or Dale or the St. Lawrence River. But my approach with forward-facing sonar is generally like, I want to be the scalpel, man. I want to catch everything I find. Every single fish I find, I want to catch it. Which leads me to making a lot of tackle adjustments, a lot of technique adjustments, and really taking the time to dial in what I'm doing on that fishery that week. I'm going to be perfectly honest. For a certain pattern on a certain fishery, at any given time, there is one bait, one rigging, one color, one profile that is significantly better than everything else. And if you take the time to figure it out and really dissect it from a mathematical standpoint, and just say, hey, I tried this head, I threw it 10 fish. With this head in this profile, I got 4 bites. I switched to a different size head. I threw it 10 more fish, separate fish, and I got 7 bites. I repeat this process with both heads over the course of 2 hours, and the numbers play out. And then I keep working my way down. Okay, I've dialed in what size head I'm using. Now I'm going to dial in what size profile I'm using. What am I using? 3, 4, 5 inch profile, or like let's say a drop shot. Am I using a shorter worm, a longer worm, a really straight tail worm, or am I using more of a finesse worm type deal? And I'm just going to walk myself through all of those, which, am I spine hooking the worm? Am I nose hooking it? Am I Texas rigging it? Am I throwing, a 16th, 8th, 3/16 quarter ounce weight? And what size line I'm throwing it on, just based on how that changes the way the bait moves through the water. I mean, as soon as you take the time to just XYZ it really hard, you can figure out, generally speaking, you can figure out the best technique, the best profile to catch them on everywhere at all times.
And you're basing that based on hundreds of hours of looking at how bass respond on live sonar, whether they're aggressive, whether they're chasing it, whether they're neutral to it. Do you believe that there's a fish that is a bass on forward-facing sonar that is not catchable? Or in your opinion, what percentage of bass, once you've identified that it's a bass, that you're putting a bait in front of it, what percentage do you believe are catchable?
If you take the right approach to catching those fish that you're fishing for, I would say roughly about 80 to 85%, somewhere in that range, is catchable on any fishery at any time. So we're talking 4 out of every 5 bass are catchable. That ratio does change depending on where you're at in the country. Though the couple places that I've seen that not be the case, I've seen it not be the case at the Harris chain for sure. I've seen it not be the case at Chickamauga. I've seen it not be the case at the St. Lawrence River proper, not the lake, but the river.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen it not be the case at Lake Hartwell. And the one thing that when I look at the 4 times I've seen it not be the case, where truly, no matter how many adjustments you make, how many different baits you throw, how many hours you spend re-rigging your stuff, you can't make them commit. You can't make 80% of them commit. And regardless of how well you dial it in. And the one thing those 4 places all have in common, the Harris Chain, Chickamauga, the St. Lawrence River, just the river in the summertime, and Hartwell, is fishing pressure. And as soon as you start annihilating a fishery with fishing pressure, you make it really hard on yourself to catch those fish really fast. And I mean, no matter how hard you try, I'm still convinced I dial it in better than whoever else is out there that week most of the time in terms of just getting the most fish to commit to eating. But even though it's better, those type of scenarios, you can't get the vast majority of fish to bite.
So you get a fish and you're throwing a standard. What were you throwing at Toledo Bend? A ball head with a big bite, 4-inch jerk minnow on it?
Yep, that's what I was throwing.
Okay, let's say you throw that. Fish doesn't respond to it. You're going to just start your process of working through until you find something that those fish react to, instead of just going, oh, that one's not going to bite, I'm going to move on to the next one. And then you're going to apply that to the next fish and the next fish until that pattern emerges. So I wrote this down, your bite percentage, your success is based on your bite percentage, the percentage of fish that you see. And we're talking forward-facing sonar. This is a forward-facing sonar. You are a forward-facing sonar fisherman. You're talking your bite percentage, and your success is based on the fact that you're able to get more percent of fish to bite than the average angler that is also utilizing forward-facing sonar, outside of the freak shows, the Wheelers, the Neils, those guys who tend to get on bigger schools just because they are who they are and they're casting around more fish. Yeah.
So mine is, like you said, it's purely bite percentage, and it's a forward-facing sonar only kind of thing. Like when you use forward-facing sonar, what it is, it's an information collection device. It allows us to control all the variables around us and understand exactly what we did on every approach, every time, all day long, every day. And so through that information collection process, if we look at it at a very mathematical angle, and we say, I'm going to have 3 different heads, I'm going to have them, all with the same profile. And over here, I've got the same head with 3 different profiles. And I'm going to work through that process. And you just look at it from, I'm going to throw at X number of fish, see X number of committals or non-committals. And, obviously there's some times where it doesn't, you got to omit an instance. If you're running this, what we'll call experiment, and you have one, let's talk about throwing like a shaky head or something. And you're going down the bank and you have one that you see 15 feet out from the boat, and he starts coming up to look at you, and you just drop your shaky head down and he doesn't eat it. I don't see that as a true instance, because that fish was interacting with you in some way, shape, or form. We're talking about controlling the environment and making sure the fish aren't aware of your presence. If they're not aware of your presence, then you can just run this whole process and just dial it in as best you can. If I have the choice, why would I want to have to find 200 bass to catch 10 of them when I can choose to find 30 and catch 10 of them? And so in that concept, maybe somebody else finds 200 bass and they catch 10 per 200, and they find 300 in a day. Okay, they're catching 15 bass. Well, I found 70 fish in a day at those numbers, but I'm catching 10 out of 30. And so in that 70 fish, I caught 23 bass. And that's just the raw math of it. Like if you just look at it from a very raw, this is what it is, I've thrown at X number of fish and got X number of committals standpoint, you can make a little into a lot really fast.
Do you think it helps that I got so many directions that I want to go? We're going to go all those directions, Drew, because this is fascinating stuff for me, if you're cool with it.
Oh yeah, dude.
Okay. So do you think it helps? And I know you room with Matt Steffen and you're buddies with him, and I was talking to him a little bit, and he's like, dude, the guy's like just committed. Like that's part of the reason why he's so good, is he's just committed. Like he's going to go scope and he's going to scope, where he's like, I'm splitting up my practice and I'm going to go check and see if the shallow bite's there. And then I'm going to go see if the pre-spawn bite on the secondary points are there. Then I'm going to go see like if the traditional stuff. And he goes, by the time I've narrowed it down and it's time to go scope, he's like, he's already got 2 days on me because that's all he's done. So you go to the fishery 100%, you put the trolling motor down and everything is forward facing sonar from the first cast to the last cast, and you ignore all of the noise, I guess, the stuff you read about in Bassmaster growing up, the stuff you read about in classic patterns and all that. But here's the question then. How do you know where to start? Because from the outside, it looks, are there patterns within the randomness as far as, hey, this is a high percentage spot where I'm most likely going to find fish?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And this is where what we used to, what we initially understood about bass behavior and the ability to use forward-facing sonar kind of collide. So forward-facing sonar in and of itself, you can go stare at it all day long, every day. And if you don't understand how to consistently view a fishery as a systematic thing, where in most fisheries, let's just talk about reservoirs because it's the easiest to understand. With a reservoir, you're generally going to have 3 sections of the lake. In any reservoir, you're going to have 3 unique sections. And each of these function as their own lake. And this is where we talk about map breakdown and understanding that based off the conditions, the water clarity, the time of year, and the forage in the fishery, where to go to try and start looking for fish. I mean, like I use scope all day, every day. But that doesn't mean, like, people, when they think about using forward-facing sonar, they think offshore, light line, out in the middle of the lake all the time. And that's not the case. I catch them. I made over half of the checks that I made last year within 20 yards of the bank using forward-facing sonar. Like, I am just trying to find the population, whatever the lake I'm on. I'm trying to find the majority population of big fish. I'm just applying forward-facing sonar to what I'm doing. So before I drop the trolling motor, it's the same process as it always was, which is looking at the conditions, the water clarity, the lake level, the population in the lake, the forage base, the amount of cover in the fishery, and just breaking it down from that sense and saying, I'm going to start looking in these kind of places. And you just work in a systematic sense with the finding fish too. Like, if I think they're going to be in the back thirds of run-in creeks, I'm going to find places that have, seem like they build topography-wise, build to have a run-in, and I'm going to run 4 places in that section of the lake in a row. And if I don't get bit out of any of them, I can throw every single one of them in that part of the lake away. And then I'm going to the next thing, and I'm running them, and I can throw it away. And that's where forward-facing sonar comes in, because we didn't used to be able to throw anything away without being extremely thorough with our presentations and how we set up on these areas. Which meant you probably had to side scan through and find where you thought they were going to relate, and then, let them settle down for a bit, and then have 6 or 7 different presentations on the deck, and hope that you got all of those presentations and all their little details right just by guessing. And then you'd run that process. But, the process of running the back third of 4 creeks pre forward facing sonar, between idling time, letting them sit, and throwing multiple different presentations, that was a process that's probably going to take you about 3 to 4 hours, because it'd take you 45 minutes to an hour to fish, a 200-yard section with multiple different presentations to be thorough enough to understand if what you were doing was really the right thing. Versus now it's just about, like, understanding, okay, if I pull up and I look at 4 of these places and they're not there, I don't have to worry about it. I don't even have to make a cast. Like, and it's just an efficiency device. And so it's allowing me to pull up and do the same process just way, way faster. And somebody from the middle of nowhere that's not fished these places for 20 years can pull up and in 3 days understand the fishery by going at it in a systematic sense and looking at a few of these places in a certain section, and then looking at a few different places in that section, and just repeating the few different places process until I figure out what the main deal is in that section. And, if I can figure out the main deal in every section, more power to me. Those are generally the greatest tournaments. I mean, at Lake of the Ozarks last year, I figured out my deal both up lake and down lake. And even before the tournament started, I was sitting there rationing my fish, because this was a bed fishing tournament too, or at least it was right around the spawn. Not every fish I caught was on bed, but, like, I was rationing fish before I even started the tournament. I was like, day 1, the wind sets up for me to go up lake, so I'm going to go up lake. Went up lake, caught 19 pounds. Came back down. I was like, okay, day 2, the wind sets up for me to go down lake. In this practice, I hooked 1 fish all practice. So now, and I wasn't seeing them with my eyes. I was just seeing them with scope. Second day, wind set up for me to go down lake. I went down lake, caught almost 19 pounds. And then the last day, I ran both of them, caught a good bag again. Like when you can take the time to break it down in a very systematic fashion, you can figure out every section of the lake way faster than we ever could before. But you gotta take the it's just fishing out of it, because like growing up, this is the biggest thing, in my opinion, that's driven me to do what I do and fish in the manner that I fish, which is watching guys like Jacob Wheeler, Michael Neal. You watch guys like Alton Jr. has been the last couple of years. They have taken the it's just fishing out of it. It's not just fishing anymore, man. They catch them every tournament, every single tournament, all year long. They catch them. And if you don't view it as it's just fishing anymore, if you view it as no matter where I'm at, when I'm there, if I just take the right approach and I break it down in a very systematic sense, then when I do get to that point where it makes enough sense to me due to the system I've established, when it makes sense, bam, I already have an established system that I apply everywhere I go. And so once it makes sense, I'm good. I'm off and running. Because as soon as things start to make sense, if you have a systematic process that works in place, it's going to work every time.
We're about halfway through the best show of 2024 for BTL. We're going to take a break with Drew Gill, and when we come back, talk more. Highly impressed, dude. Highly impressed. It's BTL. We'll be back right after this.
The new Puma STS has been redesigned from the ground up. With the Angler design, function, and performance in mind, nothing on this new offering was compromised, and the only thing carried over from the previous version is the name. Based on the Soft Touch series hull that started with the flagship Jaguar, this new model is nimble and performs incredibly well at all speeds with either a 250 or 300 horsepower engine. Featuring a new 96-inch wide-body footprint, this hull measures out at 20 foot 7 inches in length. Industry-leading design coupled with tournament-winning performance. The Puma STS from Basscat. Feel the rush.
Everything you need, one legendary brand. Top on Strike King.
Fish, anyone.
Get the best patterns backed by tournament data. Start by finding the best 10% of your lake. Know exactly what to look for and what to throw. After that, just put them in the boat. Try the Deep Dive app today.
Look at that beast right there. My Pro Guide batteries keep me going on those long tournament days and long practice days. Always plenty of juice, never fail. The best part about Pro Guide batteries, it's the people behind the company. They have over 40 years experience in the battery business, keeping all of us fishermen out on the water longer, catching more fish. Check them out at ProGuideBatteries.com.
All right, welcome back. BTL, chatting with BPT rookie Drew Gill, fresh off of a top 3 finish at Toledo Bend to kick things off. And if you listen to the first half of the show, I think Drew Gill is in for a lot more top 10s throughout the year. Some really fascinating stuff. This is definitely by far in all of the forward-facing sonar talk, which has dominated the industry early this year, even before tournaments started. All the guys' different setups and how it fits into the sport and where it fits in. And I want to get your take on that. But by far the most technical breakdown of it, and why, even though you might have 1,000 guys who have the same setup, you're still seeing the same handful of guys that are succeeding at it. I think you cannot listen to the first half of what you just said, Drew, and not come out of that discussion with, wow, there is a definite skill that is involved in this. It's not a point C cast and catch. And does that, Okay, be honest with me here. Does that piss you off? Because you're a forward-facing guy, you do it exclusively. You have to hear the scuttlebutt around going, hey, he's a live scope guy, and it takes away. When you're laying at bed at night, does that keep you awake at night knowing that people are saying, hey, the only reason you are where you are is because of technology? Or do you agree with them?
So, man, it's not something that keeps me up at night, but it is a conversation that like none of us can ignore in the industry. You know, it's a very prominent, high profile conversation. But like, looking at it from just a raw sense, when I step back, we're in the year 2024. High level bass fishing has been around for, let's talk about the highest level of the sports, 35 years probably is how long it's been like a competitive sport. Look at it from that sense, all the major fisheries we have, all of the cached history and understanding and experience we have. Tell me, without the ability to control all of the variables that are going on in the scenario, and although I understand how fish relate to areas really well and what they kind of do in certain times of year on certain places, how am I supposed to compete as a kid from Illinois that didn't get into tournament fishing until I was 17? How, without the ability to collect information really, really fast, can I compete in 2 days or 3 days of practice with somebody that's fished on a place for 15 years?
Well, I don't think you can. And I think that's what's pissing off a bunch of guys is that you do have a younger generation and you're saying, hey, these guys aren't paying their dues. They're not learning the process. They're not grinding for it for a decade. And here I am 20 years into I'm just telling you what I'm hearing. I've talked to guys over the past week who said it. He said, listen, I put my dues in, I grinded it. What I've made my bread and butter at is no longer applicable, and I'm getting beat by a 21-year-old from Illinois who came into this game on live scope. But what about the 3 decades of experience that I've put in on this, that I've put food on my table, and now this box with fish on it is meaning that I'm finishing an 80th in the points instead of cashing a $10,000 check and finishing 40th in the points. I don't know the right answer to this. I'm asking you because you're one of those kids that's coming on and that's taking checks and that's cashing checks. It's a weird scenario for the industry right now. That's why I'm intrigued with this, because I don't know the right answer. I literally could interview a guy who's done this for 40 years and been like, oh yeah. But then I interview you and I'm like, hell yeah. Advancement in technology, adapt or die. Look at all the skill that's involved. Everyone else can have this. Drew's just figured it out because you're a smart kid.
That's the part that frustrates the heck out of me is the kind of point and shoot or the spotlighter phrase. They haven't taken the time to understand the people that are upset about it. Truly, I would say at least 98% of the people that are upset about it, they don't understand the technology. As soon as you understand the technology and you spend enough time to really, truly get to know the fish in the fishery, you will be upset about it because you think that it's point and shoot, and it's just how many fish I can point at in a day and shoot at. The entire college field now, you look at the whole college field, go to a college tournament. I invite anyone that doesn't like live scope or thinks it's just a point and shoot spotlighting thing, go to a college event and drive around. The entire field, 200 plus boats will be using forward facing sonar. The weights look similar to most tournaments, maybe a little bit. There's times where it does look a little bit better than most tournaments, but drive around, 80% of the field's going to fail.
In your opinion,
if it was that easy, they would just pick it up and do it.
Yeah,
they're not.
But everyone's still doing it though,
and a lot of effort.
In your opinion, is this the future? Are there going to be more and more specialists? Is this a future? What does the BPT, what does the Elite Series look like 5 years from now? Is there such a thing as blind fishing anymore, or will 100% of the fish be caught and used using forward-facing sonar as this gets more and more in? Because really, it's been around since 16, 17. We saw Scott Martin's, in my opinion, Jason Christie won one on Lake St. Clair. Didn't say anything about it when he was cracking the tube. He was using, the Panoptics with the blob. Scott Martin had a year or two. Go back and watch his videos from when he won on Cumberland, and you're trying to figure out why the hell is this guy making 20-foot casts with a jerk bait and catching big giant fish. And then once you go back and watch it, you realize, hey, he was scoping. There's been a number of guys, but it's fairly new. What does it look like 5 years from now, Drew? You're one of the guys that are pushing this into the forefront.
Guys, a lot of guys that use it a lot, I think, try and sugarcoat it. And I'm not going to. 5 years from now, it will play a role in almost every tournament won. It's an efficiency machine. How are you going to beat a man that has the ability to have true, tangible facts behind everything he's doing when what you're doing is trying to be the best guesser? You're trying to be the best guesser if you're not using it. And when you're trying to beat a man that has tangible facts behind everything he's doing because he's watched fish behavior the entire week on that fishery, you can't beat it. You can't. Because you cannot guess your way to a win when somebody else has facts. And that's the thing, man. And another thing that aggravates me about it is guys, the same people that are the spotlighter people are the same people that talk about how it's unfair to kids to tell them to expect to spend all this money. It costs $2,500 for a live scope and a transducer. I worked at a grocery store for $7 an hour and mowed people's yards to pay for my boat and my first scope unit, because I knew that a $2,500 investment was a lot cheaper than going to all these places to pre-practice for a week because I've never been there before I go to an event a month later. You know how much money I sat down and did the math on this. If you were to pre-practice for a week for every event all year, let's say you're fishing 8 tournaments. You're fishing 8 tournament schedule. You're going to pre-practice for a week. That's going to cost you roughly $35,000. Tell me, how is it unfair to look a kid in the face and tell them that $2,500 is the reason that they can make or break their career when the alternative is catching themselves up to speed the old-fashioned way? And you can't look at a 16-year-old kid in the face and say, hey, you have to have 8 weeks of the year blocked off for nothing but pre-fishing, and you have to have $35,000 to spend on it. Because back in the day when people were figuring it out, tournaments paid a lot more, and the cost of living and expenses was a lot less. And now it costs me no less than $1,200 to even go anywhere for a week.
So you don't care where you're going.
Do what?
You don't care where you're going. You're not doing, like I said, you're kind of looking at what type of lake it is, how it breaks down, what sections it's in. You could care less what was going on before you got there, what's going to happen after you get there, because a bass is a bass. And if you apply this is a roundabout system, but you apply your system, you just go to the fishery and catch the fish that you can find that week, and then worry about the next fishery when you get there.
Yeah, and that's one thing that college fishing really prepared me for, is because between the homework and the number of, we fished 4 tournaments a year with 4+ championships, so 5 tournaments a year with Bassmaster. We would fish 5 tournaments a year or 6 tournaments a year with MLF. We would fish 5 tournaments a year with ACA or 4 tournaments a year. So we're looking at 15 tournaments a year. You don't have time to try and mumbo jumbo him-haw around and get comfortable with a lake for 2 weeks for a tournament. You don't have any time to go there before the tournament. You got to show up and figure it out. And so it was a very direct, fast, get there, figure it out, catch them, move on system.
All right. Right now, the biggest thing is guys are obviously unveiled on the Bass Pro Tour this past week what their rigs were. I almost feel like, in a sense, Bassmaster was kind of like, hey, we're watching you this year, but we might do something about it in the coming years. But like, right now it is the wild, wild west. I'm looking at a picture right now of 7 live scope transducers on a boat. I'm looking at another picture right here of 5 16-inch units and 3 12-inch units on a boat. It legitimately looks like a spaceship. I'm looking at guys with thumbs up on the back of their boat with transducers off of it. Right here, I've got a picture with 3 different transducers on the same trolling motor shaft and head.
Yep.
Should there be limitations in your opinion? What should the limitations? How far does it go? Where do you determine that? This is the hottest topic, and I will have 20 comments in
no doubt
BTL about another forward-facing sonar show. I'm sick of hearing about this stuff, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, yeah.
But this is the issue right now in professional bass fishing. You're kind of at the middle of it. What are your thoughts?
So the million transducers and screens thing, I don't know, man. Me personally, I'm a 2 up front, 2 at the console kind of guy. I run 1 live scope transducer, and that is it. In my opinion, if you understand forward-facing sonar really well and you understand lakes geographically and topography wise and understand how to find fish consistently just using 2D in your charts, plus you understand forward facing sonar for catching the fish really well, your improvement that you get from adding 1 million transducers and screens is minimal. The maximum part of that curve of getting better and understanding is on the using it on the trolling motor actively for catching fish part. Once that part of the curve is complete and you kind of plateau at whatever skill level you end up at with it, the adding more transducers, it's proportionate. The more transducers you add, the less value you're adding with each one. And I don't like the concept of limitations on it, just because every time we decide to do an Alabama rig thing and we stop ourselves from progressing because we're afraid of it. Me personally, I don't foresee myself ever being a 5 transducer guy, but there's guys that are doing it. And if they progress and it does something that improves the way we catch fish and it improves tournament weights and whatever, more power to them. But
you're one deucer, right? You have 4 graphs, 1 transducer.
And I'm just not a big limitations kind of guy, because every time we do that, we make it harder on ourselves to make progress, because there will always be those that want it to be left the way that it is. And regardless of what the limitation is, it's like the Alabama rig thing. Stupidest thing ever. We didn't understand the Alabama rig then. It was really good everywhere all year for like a year or two. But guess what? Fish get conditioned. They always do. And the fact that we have the ability to watch how they interact with an Alabama rig now, is there a time of year, water clarity, and type of fishery that it is the best? Absolutely. It is almost unbeatable on cleaner water fisheries in the wintertime. But guess what? It's got its box. The Alabama rig is in its box, and no one is willing to admit they were wrong enough to bring it back. It's got its box. What would happen if we decided we wanted to ban a Senko in April and May? Just because the Senko beats everything in April and May. I mean, are we going to do that? No. There would be riot in the streets. Why does it matter now that this thing's got 5 wires on it? And I understand, like back then we didn't have the equipment to throw it that well. And we got 1 million of them hung up, broke off $400 worth of A-rigs before scope, whatever. But now that we have the ability to throw it effectively and understand that it's not a cheat code, the fact that no one's willing to bring it back is just people not admitting that they were wrong. And every time we slap a limitation on something, what we're doing is we're saying, okay, progress, okay, the ability to get better and improve with time, chill out a little bit. And so I'm not a million transducers guy, but I'm just very wary of putting limitations on things.
I'm the same way. I've mentioned this on BTL numerous times, is what if they're like, whoa, what do you mean you can make one pass across a point and see if there's multiple brush piles on it with the side imaging? What do you mean you can drop the trolling motor and see that there's a brush pile off to your left with 360? At the same time, you said you're a golf guy, right? Why is it limited to 460 cc's for the driver head? Why are they changing the balls? Why did they start talking about these when courses that had been historically tough courses, some guys got out there and started out driving the entire course to where everything was a driver and a pitching wedge? I don't know what the right answer is. I just do a show to talk to people, some of them who want to flip wood and not know when they're going to get bit, and some of them who want to know exactly the size and fish that they're going to catch every time. But I think that it's a very integral and odd time in the sport, because
for sure.
Like what you mentioned, it's hard to put limitations on, but I mean, dude, some of this stuff is just freaking goofy, man. We're talking $50,000 on a boat. I find it interesting that you do what you do with one transducer. Now, do you switch that transducer between perspective and forward, or you're just a forward transducer guy?
Forward all the time, man. Forward all the time.
So would you be opposed? Do you think it would affect you if they did institute some sort of limitation on it? Based on what I'm saying, what I'm seeing, and what you're doing, as long as they allow some sort of forward transducer, you're golden.
Yeah, it wouldn't affect me whatsoever. But, I mean, it's just, man, anytime you give any organization or authority the power to control how people do what they do outside of the already set legal parameters, as soon as you give any organization the ability to control how people do what they do, they'll abuse it at some point. And I don't love the idea of giving any group the power to just, whenever they don't like something, to just stop it. Let's just stop it. Pump the brakes. And even though I'm a kind of guy that will have one transducer, probably, will never go to 4 or 5 transducers ever in my, I don't foresee it, at least right now in my career. Even though I'm not that kind of guy, I just don't like the idea of giving the power to the masses to just stop and start everything when they want to. Because as soon as you do that, you hamper progress, because as soon as anyone wants to do anything unique or new or interesting, if people don't like it, they'll just stop it.
All right. Dude, you're 21 years old. You made the final day of the Bass Pro Tour. You've been in that position before. You fish against a lot of the top guys on the pro circuit or the invitationals. But it had to be pretty cool dueling it out with some of the top guys in the world on that final day, having the cameras there, representing your sponsors. Just kind of talk about that final day, Toledo Bend, and being in the mix in your first BPT Derby.
That was such a good place to start the Every Fish Counts format for me, just because, it's not a place where there's some places like we're about to go to Santee Cooper and Eufaula, Oklahoma this spring. And those are places where it's a 5-fish tournament where if you catch more than 5, good for you, pat on the back. Toledo Bend is a raw, every fish counts, slugfest kind of tournament where you don't have to worry about, how many fish you're catching or what size of fish you're catching. Like, am I catching 3 and changes, or am I catching the occasional 7-pounder or whatever? It's one where you don't have to think the format too hard, because you're going to have enough fish throughout the course of the week to go where you need to go. And it was an awesome tournament to start the year at. And man, to get to fish that format with Score Tracker and Every Fish Counts, and just it's an absolute pedal to the floor dogfight. And it felt like 1 step forward, 2 steps back. Like in the qualifying round, for anybody that was watching toward the beginning of the event, like every time I caught a fish, I would ask for a Score Tracker update, and Jacob had caught 2.
Yeah.
Every time I catch one, he's caught one.
You'll get used to that.
And like
it's every tournament.
It's 1 step forward, 2 steps back. And like in the last day, the championship round, I was out there catching, and by the end of the second period, I'd worked myself back to within 2 pounds of Dustin. And I was 1 scoreable bass away from passing him. I'm fishing. I start period 3. Bam, catch one. I catch 5.11. I'm like, let's go. Almost 6-pounder. Hanging on the scale. I'm like, Score Tracker update. And I'm expecting to be like, you're leading by X amount. And he goes, you're now in second place, 4 pounds, 2 ounces behind Dustin Condell. And I was like, are you freaking kidding me? Dude, it's just nonstop. And that format is so overwhelming, but man, it's a blast to get to fish against guys I've watched. You look at that top 10, it was Wheeler and Connell and Alton and Becker and and Jesse Wiggins and Zach Burge and Martin Villa, Justin Cooper. I mean, a bunch of guys that have been doing this for a while, and guys that I've, a good handful of those I grew up watching. Mm-hmm. And to get to compete against them, especially in a format that's that personal, because that format is really personal. It was an awesome event, and it was a good start to the year, man. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's a really hard accomplishment to try and chase after, and it's something that's going to be a challenge. But if you're in any field that is a tour style thing and your focus is not Angler of the Year, you're short selling yourself goal wise. And it's going to be something that will be incredibly hard to chase after with that field. But I want to try and compete for Angler of the Year, and to start the year off with a 3rd place finish, I'm cool with it.
That's well stated. All right. I got one more question. Then I'm going to give you a chance to kind of let people know where they can follow you, where they can watch you. I think you're very quickly going to become a fan favorite, dude. Incredibly well spoken, especially for 21. Like, seriously, it's like you've been doing this for 30 years. Top 5 in your mind right now, the Mount Rushmore of pure live scopers in the world. Doesn't matter what they've
pure live
scopers in the world. Doesn't matter what they've accomplished. Just, I mean, you're in that world. Give me your top 5 right now.
All right. Pure live scopers. Jacob Wheeler. Patrick Walters. Pure live scopers. Dakota. Spencer Sheffield. And Alton.
There you go.
Pure scopers, nonstop 24/7 scopers.
Yep.
There's your top 5.
Wow. That's good stuff. You have a YouTube channel? You gotta get those views up. You're way too good to not be having 100,000 views on every single one of your videos. Cause I went at it and looked at it, dude. You're cut the learning curve down for a bunch of guys here.
Yeah, and that is one thing I want to expand on for sure. It's just I've kind of overbooked myself tournament-wise this year, and it's hard to find the time to edit. That is the biggest struggle.
Oh, 100%. Well, you keep doing this, you'll be able to have an editor here in a couple years. You'll be pulling the Scott Martin Wheeler, Brandon Pollock type deal where you got the guy that you're just saying, hey, throw this one out for you. Because you're fishing what? You're fishing 6 or 5 invitationals, 8 or 9 BPT events. What else do you fish? That's a 15 tournament schedule.
6 invitationals, 7 BPTs plus whatever team series I end up fishing at the end of the year, which is, malleable based on how well you do, plus 5 Toyotas.
Wow, that's a lot of fishing, dude.
It's a lot of fishing. And I started off the year with my last college tournament of the year, which was the college championship at Kissimmee.
Yeah, I bet they're glad that you're going to be there. After this, are there a bunch more guys just like you coming up in college over the next 5 years? Like last year in the Opens, we saw what JT Tompkins, what Trey McKinney, what a number of those guys did, and we were like, oh, we got the 20-something-year-old scopers out. This year, we're going to see. But I mean, is it an endless stream of talented anglers that are now coming out of the college? Like, are we in a completely new world?
It's unbelievable, man. Just look. People, know a lot of the college events are going on sometimes, but they really don't pay that much attention. If you look at the weights. Just look at the weights from college tournaments and how much they increase every single year for qualifying for championship cuts and things like that and winning weights. It's getting ugly in college fishing really fast. And
it's kind of exciting too.
But it makes you good so quick, getting to fish against, one of my early years. I mean, I got to fish against the graduating class that was like Rob G and Logan Parks and Griffin Fernandez and my buddy Cole Breeden and a bunch of other guys that were extremely, and like Tyler Christie and Bailey Blesser fished for McKendree, who had a million top 10s. Like guys that are unbelievable, and any tour they step out on and try and fish, they immediately step out and do extremely well. And like the next one we're seeing right now, and that will, it would surprise me if he didn't make it this year, is Easton Fothergill. Easton's the greatest college angler I've had to fish against my entire – he's my age, my graduating class, and my entire college career. He is the greatest college
Minnesota guy, right?
Yep.
Yeah, no, I've had multiple buddies up in Minnesota that were like, hey, this kid's about to just smoke you. And he did in the first one, and he doesn't appear to be stopping anytime soon. Like they treat him like he's royalty already. And he's like 21, 22 years old. They're like, oh, yeah, that guy just catches him. Like everywhere. Doesn't matter.
Everywhere doesn't matter. If you look at his college track record, he has more top 10s than not top 10s. How hard that is to do in 250 boat tournaments?
Yeah, no, I do know. I'm very well aware of how hard that is to do. Where else can everyone follow? Your social medias, stuff like that.
Find me on Instagram, Facebook, just about anywhere you can find me. Find me at Drew Gill Fishing. Especially, if you guys could give me a sub on YouTube, that would be great. That's something I'm looking to expand on and definitely start utilizing more, because I'm a guy that likes to extrapolate. I'm not a guy that fits into a 30-second box very often. And so I do lots of content on Instagram and Facebook, but ultimately the platform that I'm looking to work on the most long-term is definitely YouTube, because it fits my instructional style the best for sure. So if you guys could go over there and give it a look, I would really appreciate it.
Drew, before I let you go, I have one favor to ask, if you don't mind. Since you are rooming with Matt Steffen for the rest of the year, every chance you get, I would like you to hammer home to Matt Steffen how much better a gas station Buc-ee's is than Quick Trip. That's my only request.
I'm not going to do that because I agree with Matt.
You're a Quick Trip guy?
Dude, Quick Trip's awesome.
Oh, I'm glad we waited an hour and 5 minutes into this one before you brought that up.
Buc-ee's is a spectacle. It's like comparing – it's like comparing Bass Pro to lots of tackle stores. Bass Pro is not a tackle store. Bass Pro is a spectacle with tackle, which is a super cool thing.
Yeah.
And has been dominant in the whole industry for so long, but it's so uncomparable to anything else. You can't put Buc-ee's in the gas station box because it doesn't fit in that box. So you got to leave Buc-ee's out of the conversation. Not that Buc-ee's isn't awesome, but you can't compare Buc-ee's to everything else because it's such a massive ordeal that you just can't compare.
Okay. That's fair, dude. I thoroughly enjoyed this. Like you'll testify. We'd never talked before. I shot you a message, said, "Hey, jump on BTL, and we'll figure it out as we go." Hopefully, you enjoyed it. I think we tackled some tough topics that will be talked about for years to come, regardless of what does or doesn't happen. What is undeniable is that you are an extremely talented young angler with an incredibly bright future. Represent the sponsors and the companies that have put their faith in you incredibly well. I'm highly impressed. I'm a fan now and can't wait to watch you the rest of the year, Drew.
I appreciate it, Matt. I had a fun day. So
thanks, dude. Take it easy.
Yep, you too.
All right, that is Drew Gill. We're going to take our final break of the show when we come back. Thoughts from the show and what we have going on the rest of the week. It is BTL, and we'll be back right after this.
The Spro Little John crankbait has been around for almost 15 years, and it is one of my go-to crankbaits whenever I need a fish in the boat, so you can never have enough new colors. That's why Spro's coming out with a handful of new colors, including Pearl Shad, which has this bleached out white look, but it's got this pearlescent, really, really pretty. We've got Copper Shad, which looks amazing in the water. It's got that purple flake on the back, really, really pops in the water. And then if you want some real pop, we've got Sparkle Shad, nothing but sparkles all over this thing. And then last but not least, we've got the matte Sexy Shad, just a really different looking color for a crankbait. So you want to give them a little different look, that matte Sexy Shad is definitely the one to go with. All these colors are available in the original Little John and the MD. Having confidence in your tackle while on the water is one of the main things to success, in my opinion. In the last couple of years with Denali, I've had just that. From anything from spinning rods, casting rods, tungsten products, even now to casting and spinning reels, I have the confidence to go out there and get the job done and know that all my equipment is going to handle it and do it just the way I want it. The thing about Denali is you've got great quality products at a great price point, so make sure you check them out. I'm the kind of guy that never leaves the house without a pocket knife, and Gamakatsu's come out with the EDC series of knives. EDC stands for everyday carry, so whether you're on the water or off, you can always have it with you. The best thing about it to me is that assisted open feature. With this D2 blade, you've got it right here at your fingertips, so if you can't find your scissors, you need to cut a knot, you need to cut your braid, you've always got it. Make sure you check it out. Never leave home without your Gamakatsu EDC knife.
Born in Japan, using technology, innovation, and precision, Sunline produces the widest selection of fishing lines at the most technologically advanced line factory in the world. Manufactured at the strictest tolerances to produce victories at the highest levels of tournament bass fishing. From household names like Christie, Swindle, and Cruz, to young guns like Cook, Logan, New, and Welcher, they all trust Sunline to take them to the top of the leaderboard. Choose the line that will give you the strength to guarantee your confidence. Sunline.
Have you considered purchasing new electronics for your rig? The type of mounts you choose to protect your investment should be part of the decision-making process. No matter if you prefer 1, 2, or 3 graphs up front, Beatdown Outdoors has a solution for you. Adjustable, versatile, rigid, and made in the USA. What's your ultimate electronics setup? Check out the full selection of Beatdown Outdoors products by visiting beatdownoutdoors.com.
In 2023, we became a household name in the crappie fishing world thanks to Power Breaks, the game changer. Hey, bass fishing world, buckle up, because you're next. It's going to be fun. Welcome to the next evolution of our product line, Power Breaks Sidekick, designed to install right on your shallow water anchors. We are the first and only fishing brake company to offer a breakaway system. Just like with the Game Changer, the Power Brake Sidekick has it as well. And it's not a matter of if you're going to need it, it's when. Power Brakes, the most durable fishing brakes available on the market today. Made right here in the USA with our rock-solid 2-year warranty. Hey, not all fishing brakes are built equally, and you owe it to yourself to find out why ours are different. Power Brake Sidekick. Order yours today at mypowerbrakes.com. You'll be glad you did.
All right, wrapping things up. in the brave new world of professional bass fishing. This is BTL. Big shout out to Drew Gill. Hard to deny, guy's incredibly well spoken. Like I said, I listened to a couple of his interviews before, talked to Matt Steffen a little bit, but it's interesting. I think we saw this coming. Heck, I mean, before, I think the first one I want to throw like Brandon Card, Clint Davis, obviously the Lee brothers in there, but collegiate fishing is obviously building tour-ready pros. Just like Bassmasters made a concerted effort with the 9 open EQs as far as the publicity for it, increasing the payout, although they also increase the entry fees, and making anglers fish across the country. That was one of the things that Drew Gill talked about, was being tossed in a variety of different environments and figuring it out. And these guys are smart, and they have been smart. And I'm sure that the same discussions were going on when Kevin and Edwin and Skeet and Aaron and all of these guys were coming up and started utilizing different tactics and techniques, the finesse stuff with the spinning rod, the side imaging, the offshore. And then before that, there had to be a generation before David Fritz, when he was using a flasher that was straight triangulating and doing a bunch of different, like, it's cyclical, but it's obviously easier to look at what is right in front of us. Recency bias, right? So I don't know what the right answer is. I don't know what the wrong answer is, but it's obviously apparent interviewing some of these guys that are at the top game. I mean, they're not lucking into this. They have a system. They're incredibly talented. They're incredibly committed to what they're doing. And just because it's not the normal way that we're used to catching it doesn't mean that it's a wrong way. But like I told Drew, I see both sides of it. So that was a heck of an interview. Really enjoyed Drew Gill. Like, if you go to his fishing, he said a closer look at how the next generation is setting the pace. Drew Gill Fishing. I think that's incredibly well said. So he's got a full tournament slate. I'm currently at Lake Ouachita practicing. Stay tuned to the basszone.com, basstalklive.com also takes you over to it for this week's schedule. That's all we got for today. We'll talk to everyone later. See ya.